Hello everyone, I am Tom and today we're talking about The Ugly Stepsister from 2025, written and directed by Emily Blichfeld. This is the type of film I love, when a film can balance having completely horrific moments where you're literally on the verge of throwing up, but then also can use that to talk about different social themes and give us bits and pieces to pick apart and have a think about. The film is a slightly distorted retelling of Cinderella, told from the perspective of one of the stepsisters. So it's taken a story you're familiar with, but given it a slightly darker but more realistic look at it, addressing the themes of beauty standards, misogyny, and how women were viewed in society at a certain point in history. It's not trying to be a full historically accurate depiction of the era, and there's still some of those fairy tale aspects, but with a well written film like this one, you can interpret how it's using the setting, characters, and plot to make us think of how we can apply it to our present day. As mentioned, the film does have some pretty extreme moments, and the effects are excellent, but the film doesn't just knock you over the head with constant gore. Every scene that includes some brutal moment feels earned and adds to the story, rather than it just being gore for gore's sake. There's also like this dark comedy element to the film, which breaks it up from being just complete misery porn, and it doesn't leave you completely broken afterwards. I think this is a fantastic film, probably one of my favourites I've seen this year, and I'd recommend this to everyone, if you can stomach it.
I've lost my mind. Crazy.
I love how this film sets up everything you need to know within the first 10 minutes. The plot, the characters, and the tone are all clearly shown to us without any of it feeling overwhelming or being rushed. The film begins with our main character Elvira travelling with her mother and sister Alma to their mother's wedding. Elvira is fantasising about the perfect fairy tale life she wants with the prince. Her dreams show us how she has this idealistic view of the world, and then when she wakes up, I love that sharp contrast from the rose-tinted look of her fantasies to the grimy, dirty look of the real world. This encapsulates brilliantly within a few minutes how innocent our main character is to the world, sort of blissfully unaware how fucked up her life is. We're then introduced to Agnes, who fills the Cinderella role of the film, and her father, who the mother is marrying. While the film does centre primarily on Elvira, I feel like the other three main women characters of the film, the mother, Alma, and Agnes, are also used to show the different facets of the social system they exist in. And throughout the film, they all have their own little character arcs, which I feel add towards the overall message the film is trying to convey. The mother and father get married, and afterwards we're given our first look at how unapologetically patriarchal this world is. We see how Elvira is treated due to her apparent bad looks, and how those around her seem to accept this mistreatment. The father throws cake in Elvira's face, but then after a pause she laughs about it herself. And admittedly, it makes you slightly laugh as well because it's so sort of unexpected. But on rewatch, this feels like a hint to how the everyday misogyny Elvira experiences has become completely normalised to her. It's almost like she accepts that this is how she will, and possibly in her mind, should be treated. Thankfully, the father dies pretty soon after, which leads to an excellent opening credit sequence. We watch as the camera moves across the dining table and are shown little clues of what's to come. The surgical tools, and then the maggots, the brush with the hair on it, the nose corrector thingy, the meat cleaver, and of course, the giant tapeworm. Brilliantly done, and all that within the first 10 minutes. The pacing of the film is near perfect. There never feels like there's a scene which drags too long or felt unnecessary, and the way the film builds the horror and the drama is just so well done. So after the father's death, the prince announces that he'll be hosting a ball to find his bride. Elvira sees this as a way to finally achieve her dreams. This kicks off the main plot of the film and sort of begins the transformation of Elvira both physically and mentally. For the majority of the film you feel sympathy for Elvira. She's constantly ridiculed and put down because of her looks, with the added layer of sadness that she's been conditioned to think that's how she should be treated. She shows genuine excitement in a scene when she's picking out new eyelashes and a new nose for surgery, which we find out involves some pretty brutal methods.
Un, deux, trois!
But despite all the pain it will cause her, she still holds on to the belief that somehow this is what it takes to be beautiful. The film also touches upon how Elvira views herself in terms of weight and body image, which I feel ties close to something we can apply to our present day. The film gives us an extreme example of this, with Elvira swallowing the tapeworm egg. But you can't help but think about how even today, people are putting random stuff in the bodies to lose a bit of weight. I like how the film addresses this sort of everyday worry and even makes fun of it. And the outcome of the tapeworm is fucking insane. There's also some naivety in Elvira's sort of view on relationships and intimacy. At one point, Agnes reads her a poem regarding a serpent. She asks what the serpent could represent, and is told,
Tympanus.
she has this almost childish look on love, seeing it as a fairy tale, but one where she doesn't have any independence and she's practically just a trophy to be shown off. But this combination of a unhealthy obsession with some kind of beauty perfection, the normalised abuse, and topped with the influence of her mother and society as a whole, leads to her taking some pretty extreme decisions. The escalation throughout the film of Elvira doing harmful things to herself to achieve some kind of beauty, while horrific in terms of context and visuals, is fascinating to watch. It starts with her squeezing a spot, and then the cosmetic surgery, then the swallowing of a tapeworm egg, and then by the end of it, she's cutting off her fucking feet, man. But there's one of these scenes in particular, which I think is probably one of the most brutal moments I've seen in a film recently. And it's the scene where Elvira gets new eyelashes attached to her eyes. To start, we see a slightly ironic pose to saying beauty is pain, and then a nice little detail of one of the nurses being blind in one eye, showing us what happens when things go wrong. Then we get to the procedure itself, and dearie me, we see in graphic detail how the eyelashes are attached. And Jesus, if you have a hard time watching eyes being poked or things like that, then you'll probably have a heart attack. You watch with gritted teeth, and we get so many close-ups of the eye itself that you feel every stitch going into the eyelid. I fucking hate it, but it's the best. The effect is really well done. It looks so realistic that I can't even tell how they did it. I mean, obviously it's probably a mix of practical and CGI, but it's so well done that your brain does start to wonder if they just did it for real. Eventually, due to the cosmetic surgery and the etiquette lessons, Elvira is selected to be one of the girls to go to the ball and have a chance with the prince. But this is where my sympathy for her starts to get a bit complicated. Now that she's achieved a certain level of beauty, she becomes arrogant and self-entitled. Around this point, Agnes has been reduced to the housemaid, for reasons we'll get into. And Elvira still seems to harbour some resentment and jealousy towards her. I think there's almost a conditioned competitiveness which fuels the jealousy that Elvira feels towards Agnes. Elvira had to go through so much pain to become beautiful, whereas Agnes hasn't, but you can't help but feel annoyed at Elvira when we get to the scene where she destroys Agnes's dress. You think about how at the start of the film you sympathise with how badly she was treated, and now she's doing the same to others. I mean, you could argue that some of their choices aren't 100% their own, and it's the influence of the people around them and the society they live in which sort of dictates some of their actions. When Elvira starts to become more selfish, and with her treatment to Agnes, she does start to slide into that more stereotypical ugly stepsister character that we're familiar with. And it did make me think of the other more famous version of Cinderella we're familiar with, and how two takes of the same story can have vastly different approaches. Although the story of Cinderella is an old as fuck folk tale, I think most of us are familiar with it through the Disney cartoon. And as the film started to move more into the Cinderella story, it was like something clicked in my brain, how as a kid and even up until watching this film, I never thought about having sympathy for the Ugly Stepsisters. Now, of course, my 4-year-old brain wasn't concerned with the more social themes of a cartoon made in the 1950s, and I doubt the people who made it were really concerned with that either. But it did make me think that when you watch this film, which essentially has the same plot, how fucked up the story really is. It's clear in the cartoon that Cinderella is the good guy, and the mother and the Ugly Stepsisters are the bad guys. But this film makes you think about how neither Elvira or Agnes fit into a good guy or a bad guy. The two characters are used to show us how different types of misogyny exist, although it would be fair to say that the mother could be classed as a villain in both the cartoon and in this film. We get a little hint of the mother's influence on Elvira early on, as her opening lines are telling Elvira to cover up her braces.
Elvira, label heading.
While Elvira has this rose-tinted look at life, I feel the mother has this almost internalized misogynistic view of herself. She almost accepts her place within the system, and rather than fight against it, willingly participates in it. Money and status are always her key motivation. We find out pretty early on that the mother only married Agnes's father for the money. Then, discovering he was just as skint as her, shows her affection by leaving his corpse to rot in a spare room for the entirety of the film. Then she uses the opportunity of the prince's ball to exploit her daughter and make herself rich. But again, on a deeper level, I feel like there could be a different perspective to look at as to why the mother acts and thinks the way she does. She doesn't know any other way of life, and the system is so ingrained in her head at this point that she feels justified in her treatment towards Elvira and feels like she's always doing the right thing. I don't think this excuses some of the hurtful and abusive things she puts Elvira through. And honestly, it's hard to defend any of her actions. But I think with the type of film that this is, it wants us to ask those questions about whether the mother is just a complete evil villain, or is she more of a complicit victim who unknowingly keeps the cycle of oppression going? Although that one scene where the mother and the tailor tell Elvira, "Tomorrow you'll make us all rich," is so sinister. The smile on the tailor is creepy as shit. What most characters seem to share with the mother is how they seem to view relationships as purely something for financial or status reasons. In fact, the only relationship we see in the film which seems to come from any type of real affection is between Agnes and Isaac, yet their relationship is kept secret due to the social standing of Isaac. Even though they have genuine love for each other, due to the death of her father, Agnes must also try and marry the prince. While at first a specific reason is never given as to why she has to, we can assume that she either marries the prince or lives under the control of the mother. The explicit way they're discovered, and how the film frames it as if what they're doing is something shameful. Agnes and Isaac are both publicly ridiculed and shamed, even though they're the only natural couple in the whole film. At the end of the film, when Agnes does eventually end up with the prince, while our sympathy is with Elvira in that scene, we also know how Agnes hasn't won anything either. Her victory over Elvira is still a defeat for herself. The film really does hammer home how none of our characters are winners. Every moment of triumph has this little asterisk next to it. I've mentioned him a few times already, but now let's have a chat about the prince and why I think he's an unsympathetic piece of shit. First off, he's a complete misogynistic wanker. Pretty much the personification of everything wrong with the world that this film exists in. In one scene, Elvira has a chance encounter with him, and we find out how much of a fucking dickhead he is. He refers to Elvira as a that, rather than a person, and he and his mates use some very explicit language when talking about Elvira and women in general. Now, I'm no prude, but come on, you don't talk like that, mate. What makes this even worse is that Elvira is still completely enamored by him. It really is like some kind of brainwashing. She has proof of the type of man the prince is, yet she still has her fantasies of how perfect her life would be if only they'd be married. It's so fucked. When we finally get to the ball and we see the ridiculous lengths these potential brides have to go through to impress this scrotum, you're thinking, all of this for this fucking twat. It's nice to know that those in power in our day and age don't use and degrade women with such lack of empathy, as they did in the hundreds of years ago that this film is set in. When it's Elvira's turn to be shown off to the prince, she literally acts like a dog. And I mean even down to the barking. She's even described as such, being called a good girl, devoted and obedient, with her favourite activity being long walks. I think the symbolism speaks for itself and is meant to be intentional. She's been trained for this exact moment. It's like a really fucked up version of Crufts. We then get this very retro looking dance sequence, which honestly feels a bit like a Kate Bush music video, which was pretty entertaining, I must admit. There's quite a few stylistic choices in this film I enjoy. Elvira's dream sequences always have this hazy look to them, and mixed with some of the camera movements, zooms and edits, it makes you feel like you suddenly watched something made in the late 70s or early 80s. I also have to mention the music by Vilda Tuve, which suits the mood of the film perfectly. There's like these harps and strings and flutes, and it has this sort of whimsical and fairy tale vibe, but layered on top there's these synth sounds, so it has this sort of really cool retro and modern sound to it at the same time. Later on at the ball we get this brilliant sequence that uses the song In the Hall of the Mountain King, or the Alton Towers theme as we all know it. Elvira is dancing with some geezer, and everything just starts to get weird. The room starts spinning, maggots are everywhere, worms are coming out of people's mouths. It's just good, man. It makes me wonder if this was meant to represent Elvira slowly seeing the slimy and disgusting truth of the world around her. We also get some nice foreshadowing in these ballroom scenes, as every so often we hear the rumble of a stomach due to the tapeworm. You know that fucker is coming out, and when it does, it's not going to be fucking nice, is it? But before all that, out of a lineup, like some strange human showroom, the prince picks Elvira to dance, and there's this weird mix of feelings. We kind of feel happy for Elvira that she's so close to achieving a dream, but we're aware of the grimy, sleazy undertone and the somewhat artificial way that this has all been put together. Elvira's happiness is short-lived, as during their dance, Agnes arrives, and Prince Charmless ditches Elvira for her. While sad for Elvira, it's not surprising that this guy would drop her the moment something more appealing comes along. But again, that mix of feelings. We sympathise with Elvira and feel her humiliation, yet we're slightly glad that she got away from the prince. Then immediately we feel sorry for Agnes because we know what being chosen by the prince will likely entail. It's a fucking rollercoaster, man. I think there's only one character in the entire film which couldn't give two shits about impressing the prince and gives us any type of hope for this world. Which brings us to the other stepsister, Alma, who's not really in the film much, but she's definitely the hero of the story. She's the opposite of Elvira, abandoning all the stupid notions of who she's supposed to be. And throughout the film, she's always looking at everyone like, what the fuck is wrong with these people? In one scene, I love how she just straight up says to Elvira that she's sick in the head. Obviously, it's a bit more deeper than that, but it's that relief to have someone be so frank with her and to finally have a character see the world for what it is. You can't help but feel a respect for Alma and the way she rejects all the bullshit around her. She seems a lot happier and content tending to the animals and mostly being herself than Elvira does trying to be someone else. And even though you can sense her anger towards Elvira for the harmful things she does to herself, she's still there for her when she needs to be. When she's the one to finally save Elvira from this horrible life, there's this genuine care for her sister that really comes through in the performance. She's the best. But there's still a bit to get through before we get to that happy ending though. Back at the ball, Elvira, hurt by being rejected, runs off to have a sulk and to throw up some tapeworm eggs. There's a moment here when the mother finds Elvira and we have this tiny bit of hope that she'll finally show her daughter some sympathy. She puts her arm around Elvira, picks her up and wipes away her tears and the weird gooey tapeworm vomit fluid. But then she follows that by slapping her and telling her to pull herself together, still thinking about what there is to gain at the expense of a daughter. The film knows exactly how to pick you up and then immediately throw you back down. If we had any inclination that the mother wasn't completely dehumanised or she could be redeemable, then that has completely gone at this point. And then at the end of the film, we get proof from a pretty explicit visual of how the mother will always choose the life she's become accustomed to, rather than the happiness of her daughters. Anyway, Elvira finds out that the mystery girl is Agnes. who has to leave at midnight, leaves a shoe behind, and the prince declares he will marry whoever fits the shoe. You know, all that daft shit. This eventually leads to Elvira trying to kill Agnes for the shoe. At this point, the system has infected Elvira so much, she throws all reason out the window and is even willing to kill to get what she wants. The mother returns home before Elvira can kill Agnes, and we get another clear indication of how the mother truly views Elvira. And God, does she piss me off in this scene. Giggling with some bloke she's brought home, she basically tells Elvira to get fucked. Now she knows there's no chance of Elvira marrying the prince. She has no use for her. You feel like shouting at the screen, but you was the one who made her go through all this, you bellend. I know I said earlier on that there might be a deeper reason to the mother's actions, but fuck me, man, it's hard not to completely hate her. We then get to Elvira's final attempt to salvage any chance of marrying the prince. Realising that she won't fit into Agnes's shoe, she decides to cut her toes off, and we get a beautiful looking close-up of those little piggies hanging off. Alma, being the absolute fucking legend that she is, comes in and immediately starts to tend to her wounds. But then the mother turns up, and we get another tiny moment of hope. There's a look on her face that maybe this is when she finally realises that things have gone too far. But nah, she tells Elvira she cut the wrong foot, which was kind of funny, I gotta admit. I think I've gone on long enough about how and why these characters got to this point, but fucking hell, what a messed up journey we've gone on. The foot mutilation doesn't work, and being unable to walk properly, Elvira falls and disfigures her face. And as a final defeat, she watches Agnes leave and walk away into her fantasy. While we know if Elvira had the life she wanted with the prince, she probably would have been merely a trophy to show off. You feel a sense of despair with that added layer that, after all she went through, ultimately it was for nothing. But things are going to get slightly worse for Elvira before they get better. We know that that tapeworm has got to come out at some point, and when it finally does, Jesus fucking Christ. If you've got a weak stomach and are still watching after the eye surgery, then this will probably finish you off. I've seen some pretty fucked up shit. You know, I'm hard as fuck, me. But watching this was even making me heave. I think it's the mix of the effect itself, the music, and how long it goes on for. And I don't just mean the tapeworm, but the actual scene itself. What a thing to drop in the last 10 minutes of the film. Fucking brilliant. After that lovely moment, Elvira and Alma are finally able to leave their mother and current life behind, and it honestly feels like a weight has been lifted off your shoulders. I love the irony that Elvira has accidentally turned herself into what we associate as a stereotypical ugly stepsister. But what I noticed in one of these final scenes is a moment between Elvira and Alma. They share a laugh over the ridiculousness of the situation they're in, and it feels like for the first time in the entire film we've seen Elvira look genuinely happy. It's such a small moment, but I think it pretty much sums up what the film is trying to get across. That beauty isn't what makes someone special, and it's the relationships we have with the people who love us for who we are and not what we look like is what the most important thing is. So it's a very uplifting ending for a slightly dark film. Honestly, thinking about this film as we've gone through it, I gotta say, this isn't just one of my favourite films of this year, but probably one of my favourite films of the last few years. It's everything I look for in a film. The visuals, the music, the effects, the message it's trying to convey, and especially the fantastic performances. A brilliant and memorable film, gives us a mad twist and a fairy tale, while being thoughtful, having horrific moments, and even being funny at times. There's probably a lot more to pick apart with this film, which I haven't even mentioned or thought about, so it's definitely one that requires rewatching multiple times. And with this being the directorial debut of Emily Blichfeld, then I can't wait to see what she comes out with next, and hopefully it'll just be as heartfelt and disgusting. Thank you very much for watching, hope you enjoyed the video. There'll be some more on the channel soon, hopefully. And if there's any films you want me to take a look at, then leave a comment if you want. If not, take care of yourself, and I'll see you again.